The ancient castle groaned under a storm's weight as lightning split the night sky, tearing shadows across its stone halls. A secret door burst open with a violent gust, scattering dust like memories long buried. Prince Alaric staggered back, his breath caught as a chilling whisper seeped through the crack. "The curse is yours to bear." His hand trembled as he clutched the hilt of his sword, though the blade quivered free from his grasp and clattered to the ground, ringing like a death bell. "Who speaks?" Alaric demanded, his voice cracking beneath both fury and fear. The whisper curled through the darkness again, softer, crueler. "Your bloodline is doomed, unless you embrace the shadow within." He gasped, the truth cutting deeper than any blade, as a maiden's scream echoed from the forest beyond. The storm howled in reply, and Alaris's world shattered before his eyes. He whispered, broken, "Am I the kingdom's hope, or its final ruin?" The castle shook again, the whisper fading into silence as Alaric stumbled into the great hall. The air was thick with smoke from guttering torches. His loyal companion, Rowan, rushed forward, eyes wide with alarm. Rowan said, "You look pale, Alaric. What happened?" Alaric pressed his lips tight, struggling for words, then forced them out. "The curse. It is real. It has begun." Rowan's face fell, disbelief clashing with fear, as thunder roared overhead. "Then we are already doomed," Rowan muttered, his voice breaking. Alaric grasped his shoulder, voice steadier now. "No, we will fight. I must find the truth before it consumes us." The heavy doors moaned shut behind them as a deeper silence filled the hall. Alaric's heart raced, his curse gnawing at him like unseen claws. Rowan whispered, "What if the voice was real? Alaric, what if destiny has chosen you?" Alaric turned sharply, his eyes blazing with both rage and terror. "Do not speak of destiny," he snapped, though his voice cracked with dread. The storm rattled stained glass windows, painting them in blood-red hues. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "I will not surrender to shadows. Not while my kingdom breathes." The great hall doors burst open with another gust, and a cloaked figure stepped through, staff in hand. It was the mentor, Master Eldrin, eyes glowing faintly in torchlight. Rowan dropped to one knee instinctively, while Alaric stiffened, torn between relief and suspicion. Eldrin said, "The shadows move faster than expected. You must prepare, my prince." Alaric demanded, "Tell me what I must do." Eldrin's voice was calm, yet heavy with sorrow. "You must embrace the curse, or be destroyed by it." Alaric's breath faltered, his heart collapsing under the weight of fate. The storm outside thundered louder, as if the heavens themselves protested. Alaric's voice cracked as he said, "I will not surrender to darkness. Tell me there is another way." Eldrin's eyes softened, shadows flickering across his weathered face. "Every path leads through sacrifice," Eldrin murmured. Rowan clenched his fists, stepping forward. "Then we stand with you, Alaric, even if the cost is our lives." Alaric's gaze hardened, his fear burning into fragile resolve. He whispered almost to himself, "Then let the storm come. I will not bow." The storm's fury eased into silence as dawn crept across the horizon, bleeding pale light into the ruined castle windows. Prince Alaric stood beside Master Eldrin and Rowan, his thoughts twisted with doubt. The whisper still clung to his mind like chains. Rowan said, "The people will ask why the prince looks haunted." Alaric's voice was low, "Because I carry what they cannot see." Eldrin's eyes narrowed as he leaned on his staff. "You must leave the safety of these walls. The curse spreads through the land, and its source lies beyond." Alaric turned toward the window, the kingdom stretching beneath storm clouds. His breath shook, but he forced resolve into it. "Then we ride at first light. If darkness spreads, I will meet it head on." The courtyard lay battered from the storm, stones slick with rain, banners torn and dripping. Soldiers whispered in fearful tones as Alaric approached with Rowan and Eldrin. A guard stepped forward, shaking his head. "My prince, The forests stir with shadows. Many are afraid to ride. Alaric's gaze hardened, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Fear is natural, but surrender is death. We march. Rowan looked at him with awe, though his lips trembled with doubt. Eldrin raised his staff, his voice cutting through silence. Those who follow Alaric will find strength beyond fear. The curse is real, but so is his will. Murmurs rippled like sparks, and the soldiers lowered their eyes, ashamed yet moved. As the company prepared to march, a figure cloaked in emerald robes emerged from the shadows near the gate. It was Lady Seraphine, known for her fierce loyalty yet forbidden ties. Her eyes locked on Alaricus, holding both warmth and sorrow. She said softly, "If you ride into those woods, you may never return." Alaric stepped closer, his chest tightening. "Then I will not return alone." Rowan shifted uncomfortably, watching the silent exchange. Eldrin's face hardened, murmuring, "Love in times of war breeds weakness." Alaric's hand lingered near Seraphine's, though he dared not touch. He whispered, "Your faith is my strength." She bowed her head, hiding the ache in her eyes. The forest loomed like a wall of black teeth as the company approached. Twisted branches clawed the sky, and mist coiled around the roots. Horses snorted nervously, hooves clattering on damp stone. Rowan whispered, "This place breathes death." Eldrin raised his staff, the glow faint but steady. "The shadows awaken here." Alaric drew his sword, its steel flashing faintly in the dim light. "If the curse begins here, then here it must end." Seraphine's voice trembled, yet she held her chin high. "The forest devours the unprepared." Alaric's eyes did not waver as he stepped forward into the mist. "Then let it choke on me before it swallows the kingdom." The company entered the haunted forest, swallowed by its shadows. The air was heavy, damp, and filled with whispers. Alaric's heart pounded as he led, though each step felt cursed. A branch cracked behind him, and Rowan flinched, muttering, "We are being watched." Seraphine's eyes darted to the trees, her hand brushing the dagger at her waist. Eldrin lifted his staff higher, shadows scattering before its glow. "This place bends truth, and bends men," he warned. Alaric raised his sword. "Then let it bend around us, not through us." A shriek echoed deep within, chilling every bone. They stood frozen, bound together by fear, before pushing deeper into the gloom. The forest swallowed sound as a gray noon dimmed to emerald dusk. Prince Alaric led with steady steps while dread paced his ribs. Rowan said, "Tracks vanish and reappear like lies." Master Eldrin touched a scarred trunk and frowned. He said, "The wood is rearranging itself to test your will." A crow burst from a knot hole and scattered ash like snow. Lady Seraphine said, "Something watches with patience and hunger." Alaric raised his sword and breathed slow. He said, "Let it look upon a prince who does not run." A figure stepped from the bracken with a traveler's smile and a knight's poise. Sir Varric said, "I have hunted these paths for months." He bowed with easy grace. He said, "Your Highness, allow me to guide you to safer ground." Rowan stiffened at the polished tone and perfect timing. Eldrin said, "Safe paths rarely led to truth." Varric laughed softly like steel in silk. He said, "Then let us choose the truest danger." They followed Varric along a deer path that braided through black thorns. Alaric watched his stride and measured each courteous pause. Rowan said, "Strange how danger bows and offers tea." Varric smiled without teeth. He said, "Stranger, that princes march into curses without maps." Eldrin tapped the soil and closed his eyes. He said, "The ground remembers grief." A shiver rolled under their boots like a buried drum. Seraphine said, "Listen to the roots, they speak of old bargains." Varric glanced at Alaric with bright interest. He said, "Bargains build kingdoms when swords fail." Alaric said, "And betray them when hearts fail." The path widened to a glade ringed by standing stones. Each stone bled shadow from runes that pulsed like low stars. Eldrin said, Do not step within the circle, unless you accept its price. The runes brightened and spilled a hush that pressed the lungs. A voice rose from the circle, layered and ancient like wind in caverns. The warden said, "Blood carries debts to this wood." Its shape coalesced as branches braided into a crowned stag of smoke. Rowan whispered, "We should leave before the price is named." Eldrin said, "Silence and listen, for truth speaks once." The warden faced Alaric with eyes like wells. It said, "Your house bound our shadows to guard your throne." Seraphine flinched and hid her hand. Alaric said, "Then free them and judge me instead." Varric watched with hunger, tucked behind courtesy. He said, "A throne guarded by darkness invites brighter thieves." The warden said, "Balance returns with a heart offered under oath." Alaric stepped closer until the rune light rimmed his boots. He said, "Name the heart and I will weigh the oath." The warden's crown crackled like frost on fire. It said, "A royal heart, freely given beneath the oldest stone." Rowan grabbed Alaric's sleeve and shook his head hard. Rowan said, "Your death will not heal this kingdom." Eldrin said, "Words bend. Hearts should not break to feed them." Seraphine's voice trembled, though her eyes burned. She said, "There is always another road if we walk it together." Varric's smile cooled to appraisal. He said, "Some roads end in strength when one life is traded for many." Alaric stared at the stones and felt the curse stir like a second pulse. He said, "I will not buy hope with a corpse." The warden's gaze dimmed. It said, "Then pay with truth." The warden bent low until its antlers scratched sparks from stone. It said, "Truth begins with the name of the oathbreaker." The air thinned like glass before a shatter. "Whoa!" Seraphine whispered, "Do not judge me by the sins of blood." Varric tilted his head, interest sharpening. Eldrin said, "Speak, old guardian, before trust rots in silence." The warden turned and pointed with a branch of ash. It said, "The Regent Kale forged the curse to cradle his crown." Rowan swore under his breath and stepped back. Alaric said, "Then my enemy sits on my father's seat." Varric's eyes gleamed, and his voice softened. He said, "I can open the Regent's gates if you grant me command." Seraphine stared at Varric as if seeing a mask slide. She said, "Price follows every promise." Alaric said, "Guide us, but command belongs to the throne." Thoris spat them out at twilight into ruins drowned in ivy and ash. The shattered towers leaned like broken teeth, their banners shredded. Rowan said, "This place feels older than grief." Eldrin's staff glowed faintly as he whispered, "These stones once guarded the regent's lies." Prince Alaric gripped his sword and stepped forward. He said, "If truth is buried here, I will unearth it." Lady Seraphine's eyes flickered with unease. She said, "Not all truths free us." Varric's smile widened as if he had waited for this moment. He said, "Secrets feed ambition, my prince. Let us feast." Thunder rolled faint in the distance as the ruins' shadows stirred. Alaric whispered to himself, "The kingdom's heart was shattered here." They entered the broken hall where fire once burned in gold braziers. Now moss and silence ruled. Eldrin said, "Here." The regent chained his bargains with shadow. Seraphine touched a cracked column. She said, "My blood is tied to this ruin." Alaric turned sharply, his eyes burning. He said, "What do you mean?" Seraphine looked down, shame trembling in her voice. "My family bound the oath that gave him power." Rowan recoiled, hurt twisting his features. He said, "You knew?" She shook her head. "I knew only fragments. The truth has stalked me as well." Varric's laugh echoed. He said, "Even love hides knives." Alaric lowered his blade, but his hands shook. He whispered, "Every bond is stained." The air quivered, and from the fractured altar rose shadows, weaving into figures with hollow eyes. Eldrin raised his staff and said, "These are bound echoes of the regent's will." Rowan drew his blade, trembling. he said. They move like ghosts but strike like men. Seraphine whispered, my blood calls them forth. Her hands glowed faintly with green fire, tears burning her eyes. Alaric stepped between her and the shades. He said, then I will cut through your curse with mine. The shadows lunged, claws like smoke turned steel. Varric unsheathed his blade with calm flourish and said, now we see who falters first. Lightning flashed through the ruin, igniting their clash. The clash tore stone from walls and splintered old beams. Shadows screamed with voices of long-dead kings. Eldrin's staff seared through one, leaving ash. Rowan stabbed wildly, nearly falling under another. Seraphine fought her own blood's pull, fire in her palms searing the shade that clung to her. She cried, it wants my heart. Alaric roared, driving his sword into two at once, chest heaving. He said, then it must break me before it takes you. Varric fought near him, blade flashing, but his smile lingered in the chaos. He whispered almost to himself, power hides in ruin's marrow. Eldrin caught his words but turned back to the battle, his face darkened. The last shade crumbled into cinders, silence flooding back heavier than screams. Seraphine collapsed to her knees, fire fading from her palms. Alaric knelt beside her and said, you are not your blood, you are my ally. Tears streaked her face as she whispered, but my blood betrays you. Rowan wiped sweat and muttered, secrets nearly killed us. Eldrin lowered his staff, lines deepening on his face. He said, the regent's web still binds us. Varric sheathed his blade slowly and said, webs can be torn or worn by those strong enough. Alaric rose, jaw set, sword in hand. He said, then I will tear them until nothing remains. The storm above cracked like prophecy. The ruined silence cracked as Eldrin's staff dimmed, its glow consumed by shadows rising from the floor. A throne of black stone emerged, carved with screaming faces. Rowan gasped. The regent's seat. Alaric's breath hardened. He said, and the root of his curse. Seraphine clutched her cloak, trembling. She said, my family stood beside that throne. Eldrin's face broke with sorrow. He said, and mine bound the spell to protect it. Alaric turned on him, eyes wide. You. Eldrin lowered his head. I believed the regent would save us. Rowan's voice cracked. You betrayed the kingdom. Eldrin's voice was hollow. I betrayed myself. Alaric stepped toward the throne, shadows curling around his feet. He whispered, then I bear both your sins. The throne pulsed, and voices of kings long dead whispered, heir of ruin, claim what is yours. Alaric staggered, clutching his chest. Rowan rushed forward, grabbing his arm. Fight them, Alaric. Seraphine cried, if you sit, you are lost. Eldrin fell to his knees. He said, only one who accepts the curse can end it. Alaric's voice strained. Then my blood seals the kingdom's fate. Varric stepped closer, his voice smooth as velvet. Sit, and I will guide your rule. Rowan shouted, he seeks power, not salvation. Varric's smile gleamed in torchlight. Power saves kingdoms when faith fails. Alaric roared, enough! This throne will not own me. The chamber shook, stone splitting as the curse resisted. The floor cracked open, spilling molten light. From it rose a shadow-formed crown that floated above the throne. Seraphine whispered, it seeks a head to bind. Eldrin's voice shook, that crown was forged from the regent's soul. Rowan snarled, destroy it before it takes him. Alaric lifted his sword, sweat streaking his brow. He said, if it wants me, it must bleed first. The crown's whispers grew louder, calling his name. Varric stepped into the light, his eyes hungry. He said, or it may choose another. Alaric spun, fury igniting. You planned this. Varric bowed slightly, smile sharpened. I never planned, I prepared. Rowan raised his blade, shouting, then face us both. The chamber screamed with energy. Crown flared, blasting air like a storm. Alaric shielded his face as shadows lashed his skin. Seraphim screamed, "It's choosing!" Eldrin shouted, "Resist or surrender, the choice is now." Rowan clung to Alaric's side, crying, "You're stronger than this curse." Alaric forced his eyes open, staring into the crown's abyss. He said, "I am more than my blood." The crown shrieked, pulling back. Varric lunged forward, hands reaching. "Then let me take what you reject." Eldrin struck his staff to the floor, sending sparks across the hall. "No, that crown binds ruin, not salvation." Alaric swung his sword, cutting a line of light through the shadows. He roared, "Then I bind it to end it." The crown shattered, shards of shadow scattering into fireflies of black light. The throne split, screaming stone collapsing. Alaric fell to his knees, chest heaving. Rowan caught him, shouting, "You won!" But Eldrin's face was pale. He said, "No, he carries it now." Seraphim rushed forward, holding Alaric's hand. She said, "You bear the curse instead of the crown." Alaric's eyes glowed faintly, a flicker of darkness threading his veins. He whispered, "Better me than the kingdom." Varric stood apart, his smirk gone, face twisted in rage. He spat, "You stole my destiny." Alaric rose unsteadily, sword still in hand. He said, "I claimed my burden. Now I will break yours." Thunder cracked as the hall fell silent. The shattered hall trembled as stormlight pierced through its cracks, casting jagged streaks across broken stone. Alaric stood tall, his eyes still glowing faint with the curse's dark fire. Rowan whispered, "You carry death in your veins." Alaric's voice was hoarse but firm. "Then let it strike my enemies, not my kingdom." Seraphim stepped close, hand hovering near his arm. She said, "But every step you take consumes you." Eldrin gripped his staff, sorrow etching his aged face. "If you use the curse, it may unmake you." Varric laughed, his voice echoing. "Then give it to one strong enough to wield it." Alaric raised his sword toward him, lightning splitting the sky. He said, "Your hunger ends here." The storm's roar filled the chamber as Varric advanced, blade gleaming. Rowan shouted, "He is no ally, he is the viper." Varric smirked. "A viper strikes where others falter." Eldrin lifted his staff. "Your ambition brought this ruin." Seraphim's voice broke. "You wanted the throne from the start." Varric's eyes flared. "I wanted a kingdom unshackled from weakness." Alaric roared, "Then you betray more than me. You betray hope itself." He swung his blade, dark power cracking the stone beneath. Varric parried with precision, sparks flying. Their swords clashed again and again, stormlight strobing their faces. Rowan muttered, "The kingdom hangs on this blade." Seraphim whispered, "And on his soul." Alaric's strength faltered as shadows flared from his veins, writhing around his sword. Varric pressed forward, eyes gleaming. "The curse already eats you alive. Give it to me." Alaric snarled, "I would rather be broken than see you crowned." Rowan leapt, striking at Varric's side, but the knight spun and flung him back against the wall. Rowan groaned, clutching his ribs. Seraphim screamed, rushing to him. Eldrin shouted, "Alaric, choose now before the curse consumes us all." Alaric raised his sword high, whispering, "If I must burn, let it be for them." Shadows coiled tighter, his body trembling under their weight. Varric lunged, roaring, "Then burn and leave the throne to me." The chamber shook as Alaric unleashed the curse, a torrent of black fire streaming from his blade. Varric staggered, shielded by sheer will, yet cracks split across his armor. He shouted, "You'll destroy yourself with them." Alaric roared, "Then I destroy your hunger with me." The shadows burst outward, hurling stone to dust. Rowan, weak but fierce, shouted, "Stand, Alaric, stand for us." Seraphim clasped her hands to her chest, tears flowing. Eldrin slammed his staff down, his voice trembling. Hold the balance or all is lost. Alaric's sword met Varric's one last time, the clash ringing like thunder. Sparks and shadows swallowed the hall in blinding light. The light dimmed, leaving silence heavy as ash. Varric fell to his knees, armor cracked, blood staining his lips. He whispered, "It should have been mine." Alaric staggered, the curse still glowing faint in his veins. He said, "It was never yours to claim." Rowan dragged himself upright, clutching his side. "You did it," he whispered. Seraphine rushed to Alaric, taking his hand. But at what cost? Eldrin's face was pale with grief. He said, "He bears the curse alone now. It will eat at him until it ends." Alaric lifted his gaze, eyes burning with both darkness and light. He said softly, "Then let me burn for them." Thunder cracked above as ruins shook. Dawn calmed, leaving the hall open to moonlight. Alaric leaned on his sword, shadows faint in his veins. Rowan whispered, "We lived." Seraphine touched Alaric's hand. "But the curse breathes within you." Eldrin lowered his staff and said, "The battle is won, but the war has changed." Alaric looked skyward. "Then I will walk with darkness until light follows." Dawn spread across the ruined castle, gold cutting through ash. Soldiers crept from hiding, their faces marked with awe and fear, as they beheld their prince standing amid wreckage. Rowan said, "They see not victory but survival." Alaric raised his head, his eyes glowing faintly. He said, "Survival is victory enough for now." Seraphine stepped closer, her cloak torn but her gaze steady. She said, "You are the kingdom's hope, those shadows coil around you." Eldrin's voice was heavy. "Hope bound to curse may lead to salvation or ruin." The soldiers fell to one knee shouting, "For the prince!" Alaric whispered, almost to himself, "No, only for the kingdom." The soldiers departed, leaving silence between the companions. Rowan sat on a broken stone, hand pressed to his ribs. He said, "I would bleed 1,000 times if it meant you still stood." Alaric grasped his shoulder, voice rough. "You are my strength when I falter." Seraphine knelt near, brushing her hand over Alaric's arm. "And if the curse consumes you, I will not abandon you." Eldrin turned away, shadows across his face. "I see endings in every path." Alaric said, "Then perhaps endings are where hope begins." Rowan laughed weakly. "Only you would speak of hope with doom in your blood." Seraphine smiled through tears. "And that is why he is our prince." The companions stood on castle steps, looking across a kingdom scarred by shadow. Fires smoldered in villages, and the river glistened faint under pale sun. Rowan said, "They will rebuild, but they will not forget this night." Seraphine's hand lingered on Alaric's arm. "They will follow you, even into darkness." Eldrin's voice was quiet. "And the regent still lives beyond these walls, his power unbroken." Alaric's eyes darkened. "Then our war has only begun." Rowan clenched his fist. "Then we march until his throne crumbles." Seraphine whispered, "Even if it breaks us?" Alaric raised his sword to the horizon. "Even then." Night returned with unsettling quiet. The companions made camp at the edge of the forest, firelight flickering across their faces. Rowan drifted into uneasy sleep, muttering names of lost brothers. Seraphine sat near Alaric, her gaze heavy. She said, "I fear the curse steals you piece by piece." Alaric stared into the flames, shadows curling across his skin. "Then let it strip me until only duty remains." Eldrin sat apart, his eyes on the stars. He said, "Every star is a story of sacrifice." Alaric looked skyward, voice barely a whisper. "Then let mine be the story that ends this curse." The fire cracked, sparks vanishing into night like prayers unanswered.